Hi, and welcome everybody to another edition of the Winner's Circle Sports Betting Podcast. I hope everybody had a great weekend. And I am joined like every Monday by Mr. Doug Upstone of DocSports.com. Before we get to Doug, it is Monday, as I just alluded to. It is April the 17th. We have two free selections in the NBA playoffs for games being played on Tuesday the 18th. So without further ado, let me introduce my guest like he is every Monday and Thursday. His name is Mr. Doug Upstone of DocSports.com. Doug, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing well, Ross. And boy, what we got now tonight. We got the Stanley Cup playoffs starting on Monday night. Okay, so we can pretty much assume that's going to be really good. But the NBA, I think it's like the third or fourth year in a row now that the first weekend's been pretty good.
Yeah, yeah.
Especially, and a lot of interesting things occurred, and some unfortunate things occurred for some teams as well. So it's we'll see how this starts to play out, but it definitely was pretty entertaining. Especially, I don't know if you stayed up to watch it, but that Sacramento Golden State game, boy,
No, I didn't stay up to watch it, although I did have no, you know what? That was Saturday night, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Saturday.
I did stay up to watch that because I had the over in that game.
Oh, okay.
So,
All right.
yeah, that was entertaining, man. I'm telling you, Doug, the pace of that game was tireless. I mean, they
Right.
were going up and down, up and down. I mean, I think Sacramento, when I looked, they had 98 field goal attempts in that contest, which is extremely high, even by NBA standards, and Golden State had 90. So, fast tempo game and a lot of three-point shooting and just an entertaining game to watch.
It was great. And the one thing I would do, by the way, if I was Steve Kerr, because I started keeping track, uh, if my team wants to complain about foul calls, where they think there should be defensive foul calls against them, they might want to wait till later, because from what I saw, when players went to the thing or thought they were fouled, instead of looking at the referees and yelling and screaming, instead of running down the floor, I counted 8 points they gave up doing that. So when you lose by 3, might be something you want to address.
Yeah, that's just a lack of discipline on the team that's been very successful over the years. And sometimes a little bit of complacency might seep in when
Yes.
you've had that much success. And but you're right, Doug, in a game that close that went down to the wire like that, that's a difference between winning and losing sometimes. And, you can make a strong case. That was the reason, just based on what you just said.
Yeah, no, it was, but I mean, it just happened. I noticed, I mean, it's not that every team doesn't have, players that do this and do that, but it just became noticeable, because there were some other attempts that Sacramento had. Because let's face it, Sacramento gets the ball, boom, they're going.
Yeah.
Okay, under any circumstances, they're just taking off. So it's also remarkable. Speaking of different things, now they have 2 of them. How about all the Kentucky players in the NBA that played under Calipari in recent years? It's crazy how many there are and
Yeah.
how good they are.
Yes. Yes. And most of those players only played 1 year of collegiate ball.
Right.
So, you say, well, why weren't they that good at Kentucky? Well, why did Michael Jordan only average 15 points a game in North Carolina, or 17, whatever it was? And then he comes into the pros and he's just a dynamic scorer. So a lot of differences between the pro and the college game, obviously, starting with the shot clock and also, players get to sow their oats a little more in the NBA, Doug. They're not as confined.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Michael Jordan was the example of that I just brought up. But is that something that's noticeable to you? I mean, you look at some of these Kentucky guys and say, you know what? He wasn't that good at Kentucky. But
yeah, well, the thing that I noted, well, the old story is the only person that ever stopped Michael Jordan was Dean Smith. Okay, as the coach, and so from that standpoint, but obviously he knew his greatness as well. No, it's a more free flowing game, and the difference is that the biggest difference: college is about coaches, NBA is about players. So there's your fundamental difference right there. So just in how the game's played. But yeah, so we had that. The different injuries looks Jay Morant. Okay,
it's a shame.
that doesn't look good. Okay, from that standpoint. I hadn't seen any further updates other than he might miss Tuesday, or the game two, excuse me. And then Giannis, that doesn't look good. I mean, you probably have fallen and done that yourself, and I mean that could be easily a week injury. To fall on your tailbone like that. So that's a different one. And Miami losing, Tyler Hero.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, he was started out on fire, in that game. So that was another one. The what was your impression of the Bucks and Miami? What was going on? I mean, forget what even I mean, you give up 100 and what is it, 130 points. Something else is going on besides just not having your best player on the floor.
Well, I mean, Milwaukee definitely lacked the defensive intensity that I saw them display in recent NBA playoff years. I mean, the year they won a title a couple of years ago, all of a sudden people were shocked by how good Milwaukee was defensively because they were this high-flying scoring team, and they seemed to change their style and tighten the screws a little bit defensively during the postseason, and also slow the pace of the game down to their liking. And they were very efficient offensively, and I didn't see any of the above in game one against Miami. As a matter of fact, you stole my thunder a little bit, but I am glad you brought it up. That was probably the most surprise. I didn't use that game, but it was probably the most surprising result I've seen of any of the game ones in all 8 series.
Yeah, I don't think there's much doubt about it. I mean, it's just, and right from the start too. That was the surprising thing, and what it seemed like. I mean, there's no way Miami's going to shoot, or at least I don't think so. But there's no way they're going to shoot like they did in that game again. I mean, it's just they shot ridiculous. They shot 59% for the game. I think they shot 60 or 60+% from 3 points, and different kinds of guys were making them that don't normally do that, from that standpoint. So it's just one of the things. And which brings up an interesting point. In the playoffs, what can make playoff basketball more difficult to handicap when you're looking at individual games is when you see things that you can't forecast. And I'll use the Lakers and Memphis as an example. Reeves and can't think of how you say his last name. Hayakurma. I'm saying that wrong, but in that game, those two guys were 17 for 29, 8 for 11 from behind the arc, and they accounted for 40% of the Lakers' points in their victory. I mean, there's nothing you can do to account for that. So that's just one of those things that that just comes up. And it just, that's what makes the NBA makes playoff in general can be more difficult. Not to say you can't do well, have great years or anything like that, but some of those things when they just pop up, hard to figure.
Yeah, 2 things. I made a mistake. I did use the Miami-Milwaukee game, but I had the under in that game, so I didn't win that game, and certainly I wasn't happy with how red hot Miami was in that game, and the lack of defense, like I just alluded to with Milwaukee. The other game that you just mentioned,
Memphis and the Lakers.
Yeah. Look, I could live with Anthony Davis and LeBron James accounting for 40% of their scoring and losing the game. But the other 2 players you just alluded to, I think Reeves had 23 fourth quarter points, if I'm not mistaken, or something stupid. That you can't forecast that. You can't predict that. Those are the types of things that happen. That's why I always say, folks, if you bet your head up against the wall trying to handicap players instead of teams, players instead of numbers, that's where you run into trouble. I would highly suggest if that's the route you go and you enjoy that, well, then you should turn your attention to fantasy sports and not sports betting in particular. So, look, hey, I'm going to be talking about the Knicks in Cleveland. You're going to be talking about the Lakers or the Clippers and the Suns. The home teams lost both first games of that series. The Knicks looked awfully good in a 4-point win as a 5-point underdog against Cleveland, and Sacramento or the Clippers, excuse me, for the most part, was a wire-to-wire win against Phoenix. Now, I mean, they squandered that big lead, and Phoenix came all the way back to take a 7-point lead. And I go, here we go. And then, of course, they righted the ship and quickly turned that around for a nice victory. So, yeah, Doug, I mean, I have an interesting betting angle in game 2, and I'm pretty sure you're going to be familiar with it when I mention it, because it let's just say that it's a textbook zigzag theory kind of thing. But I'm interested in if you feel the same way in terms of the zigzag theory in the Clippers and the Phoenix game.
Well, I'm going to talk about that. I'm not going to talk about it yet, because I'll get to that. And I will say, though, before I go into it, to me this is a tough game. Okay, just in a general sense. But I did pick up on one thing, Ross, that's going on, and I'm not. It can be taken advantage of. You just have to be a fan, though, of in-game betting. So we've had 14 games so far, okay, including the play-in tournament, is what it's commonly referred to now. And of those games, the team that was leading after the first quarter has won. There was one tie. Okay, so they're 11-2 straight up. So who's leading after the end of the first quarter is 11-2 straight up. And if you take that to the end of the game based on the original spread, they're 12-1 against the spread. Okay, from that standpoint. Now, I'm not saying that's going to hold true, okay, the rest of the playoffs, but it's a pretty interesting thing to look for. And if you like to do in-game betting, and if you can get at least a reasonable number, or for example, if an underdog maybe is leading at the end of the first quarter, and then, and it might be a situation where you might be getting 5 or more points by the end of the game, it's something to look at. Okay, yeah. Certainly. I'm not advocating go out and betting it just because of what I said. I mean, because that's past history now, and we're moving ahead. But I love to find those little things that just kind of pop up out of nowhere for seemingly no reason, but for whatever reason, what tell us, if you get off to a good start, you got a great chance to win the game.
Yeah, and I get that in the NHL, because we all know how important scoring the first goal of the game is. I mean, it doesn't mean you're going to win every time, but it certainly puts you in a more favorable position, and the results will show that teams that jump out to that 1-0 lead to start the game do very well over the long haul. However, in the NBA, that sort of surprises me what you just said, because out of all the pro sports or even mainstream sports, including college, the NBA is where double-digit leads aren't safe. We see games swing in a drop of a hat. I mean, the Clippers were way up in the first half of that game. Next thing you know, they're down by 7 in the third quarter, and they're getting 7.5. The things with both of the games we're going to discuss, Doug, is the fact that we didn't see any knee-jerk reaction by the sports books. Very similar lines to what we saw in game 1. And I'm going to let you take it away here in the Clippers and Phoenix, unless you want to add any other thoughts in. And
no, I'm good to go. Well, I will add a thought, but it has to do with the Clippers and the Suns. Okay. So we'll get started. So we'll talk this game. But hey, now Ross, how about that point guard play we saw in that game? Okay, yeah. Russell Westbrook, 3 for 19. Okay, we had Chris Paul, 2 for 8. That's 5 for 27 from the point guard position. Baby, the importance of point guard play in the NBA playoffs was never more important than it was in that game.
Yeah, and it didn't. Did it shock you that we saw Russell Westbrook struggle? Because it didn't shock me. But
no. But it's just so horrible.
Yeah.
That's now. I mean, Westbrook did other things. He got 11 rebounds. I think he had 5 assists. Chris Paul really, didn't do much. But so anyway, so that struck me going back and looking at the stats on that one. Now Clippers, again, as you said, the lines haven't moved. Clippers are again a 7.5 point underdog, and that was a pretty easy, essentially a pretty easy cover for them on Sunday. Kawhi Leonard, 38 points. And it was one of those things because I'm sure you hear him too. I don't watch it much. I watch it more, maybe some during the playoffs. But Charles Barkley actually said something that was true, okay, for a change. And his thing that he said that before the game, he said that Kawhi Leonard, in his opinion, was playing as well as anybody in the NBA over the last month and might be playing the best. Well, that turned out to be prophetic because he was fantastic. 38 points. He was 9 for 10 from the free throw line. He got the big baskets when his team needed it from that standpoint. But the more important thing to me, ultimately, how it was in position for that to happen, was the difference in the bench. The Clippers bench outscored the Suns bench 34-10.
Yeah.
And that to me was the biggest difference in the game. And and why is that, by the way? Well, besides to get Kevin Durant, they had to give up some key pieces.
Yeah.
Okay. And sort of do that. So by doing that, they depleted their bench. And when you look at it, do I look at it to say, do I see 20 points out of that bench going forward? Yeah, I would say relatively so. I think that's possible. But you're not going to look at the Suns bench and say this is a good team that's going to help the starters. So from that standpoint, I'm kind of a little bit in flux here with this because that's the 7.5, still a lot of points based on what I just watched. Okay, on game one. Now, game two could be completely different. Now, the other thing I'm looking at those Suns here, Suns had 6 3-pointers. Okay, they averaged 12. So I'm thinking they're not going to probably do that again, going 6 for 19. And I also think because of the situation, going to get a much more focused and desperate Phoenix Suns team this time around because they know if they lose, it's over. Now, I do have some trepidation about Monty Williams based on last year and based on what I just saw as a playoff coach, because his teams don't seem to be really emotional into the game. That's an observation on my part, and it's my observation. Nonetheless, Clippers 4-16 on the road, when leading a playoff series. And when the home playoff favorite is favored by 3.5 to 9.5 in the second game of a playoff series, Ross, 24-5 against the spread, a small lean by me on the Phoenix Suns minus the 7.5.
Yeah, I agree with you, Doug. And again, that line at 7.5 is basically the same line that we saw in game one of the series. So, like I said before, the sports books have been undeterred by those results in game one. They very seldom panic or do a knee-jerk reaction, and doesn't shock me. Both of the lines on our games are around the same as what they opened in game one of the series. Look, Phoenix, Jesse Shule mentioned it on Saturday when we covered the Phoenix and Clippers game. He went with the Clippers, and one of the main reasons why he liked the Clippers was the difference in the lack of depth that Phoenix has had compared to the last couple seasons for exactly the same reasons you just said. You know, you have to give up a lot of players when you bring in a Kevin Durant, and when that happens, they're lacking in depth, quality depth. That is, look, anybody who's on an NBA roster is a good player, but how they perform at the NBA level, especially coming off the bench, is real critical to the success of NBA teams. And you're right, Doug. I think the Clippers, regardless of that game one result, I would have thought even if they lost that game, they were going to give the Suns all they could handle in this series because of just that. So we'll see how it develops. But you do like Phoenix to bounce back in game two. Latest 7.5, very small lean for Doug over the LA Clippers. I'm going to make it real short and sweet on mine, and I'm going to use pretty much think along the same lines that Doug just did. Basically, we got the Knicks and the Cleveland Cavaliers. Cleveland a 5-point favorite, just like they were in game one. Total of 214, irrelevant to me right now. The Knicks coming off that 101-97 win in game one over Cleveland. I cashed in nicely with that game as they were a 5-point dog as well. Now, here's the thing. We hear a lot about the zigzag theory in the NBA playoffs, and correct me if I'm wrong, Doug, it hasn't held up as well in recent seasons as it did at one time. Right. But this, to me, are two perfect examples. You just basically, with that betting angle, it applies to the zigzag theory. It just breaks it down a more specific point spread parameter. I'm looking at any NBA playoff game 2 home team that's coming off a game 1 loss. They've gone 9-0 straight up in ATS since May 26th of 2021. Now, I know that's recent, but with the game evolving the way it does, it's certainly worth noting. And the average line in those 9 games was the favorite was minus 3.9. Right now, Cleveland's minus 5. And those favorites won those 9 games by an average of 16.9 points per contest. So just short of 17. You could really, if I'm not, it's applicable to your game as well.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So, and it's my pick on the Cleveland Cavaliers here is also your angle is applicable to them as well, because they fall within that point spread parameter. So me and Doug are looking for the home teams to bounce back in game 2 of the series. And I'm going to take Cleveland minus the 5 over the Knicks. Doug likes the Phoenix Suns minus 7.5 to bounce back against the Clippers in game 2. Doug, any thoughts on my game, first of all?
Yeah, well, I like you. I also had the Knicks on Saturday, so that was a nice winner, and so that came through well. The thing that Cleveland's going to have to do, and they haven't done it yet this year, so this is a big point, is that they've lost all their games to the Knicks this year, and in each game they lost the rebounding battle. Yeah. And so even though they have technically a height advantage with some of their big guys, they're just not being physical enough. And they're just, instead of blocking out, they're just jumping. Well, they're not in position, and they're getting beat to the spot by I think that, to me, the Knicks are a little more physical team, and so they're getting to the spot in a better, and so they're winning the rebounding battle, getting the putbacks, and stuff. So Cleveland's going to have to be tougher, and I agree with you though. I think they will in this situation. I think they're going to have a little extra juice, and I'm not saying the Knicks are going to be comfortable, but everybody goes into these things that, even though it's a cliche, you just want the one win, okay, to take the series. It's a cliche, but you see it a lot where the team, if they win that game 1, the same energy level isn't always there. Whereas the opponent now in this case, the home team is very desperate, has the crowd behind them, and they get the job done.
Yeah. So it's something that's held up over the years and with a high degree of success. And again, I look at both games, the sports books, pretty much the same point spread on both of these contests. It was in game 1, so no overreaction there. And you have 2 teams in Cleveland and Phoenix with strong home courts.
Yes.
And the thing with Phoenix too is the chemistry, Doug. I mean, Kevin, they haven't really played with a full roster all year. Kevin Durant was there for a little while, then he sat out for a period of time. Now he's back. So again, I don't know what you witnessed, your opinion so far in terms of the Suns play, in terms of chemistry. Have you noticed anything there? Because a lack of playing together for any specific length of time?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the regular season told you much. Yeah, they won 8 in a row when they played together. Okay, that was good, but it wasn't, a high level of competition. And in the last 3 games, now granted, one of them they didn't play when they played the Clippers. It wasn't important, but the Suns have now lost 3 in a row. Okay, and you got to pay attention to that. So this is a team. I mean, they just got to have to bring it. And the other thing too, I think the Suns, it's important. Even though he had a good game, I think they need DeAndre Ayton to have a great game. Okay. Yeah. I think he's got, 20 plus points, and he's going to have, 12 plus rebounds. Okay. Yeah. I think that's to where he's a decisive advantage over what the Clippers are using against them in the middle. And so if they can establish that, that can help take away some of the problems they're likely to have in the bench area.
And similarly, you look at Cleveland's Jared Allen. I mean, he's got to step it up too, because I thought he was a textbook example of what you described, his lack of physicality, depending too much on his athleticism instead of getting to your spots and boxing out in fundamentals. So we'll see how that develops. I know that he received a lot of criticism as well as a couple other Cavaliers players in game one. And, we have a similar scenario there. I mean, look, here's the thing, too. Doug just mentioned Phoenix lost 3 in a row now heading into game two. Regardless of how meaningful the games were down the stretch, they still are losers of 3 in a row. On the other hand, the Clippers have won 4 in a row. Yet here we have the Phoenix Suns as a 7.5-point favorite. And you know how I like to feel about that, Doug, because they're begging you to take the underdog here with the team that jumped up 1-0 in game one. Also, the team that's won 4 in a row is the dog over a team that's lost 3 in a row. So I even like your pick even more than my own, to be honest with you. So there you go, folks. You got it from Ross Benjamin and Doug Upstone on Tuesday, April the 18th. In the NBA playoffs, Doug likes the Phoenix Suns -7.5 over the Clippers, and yours truly, Ross Benjamin, likes Cleveland -5 over the New York Knicks. Both home teams, both favorites, both down 1-0 in the series, and we'll see how smart we are on Wednesday morning. Anyway, Doug, tell the folks what you might have coming up this week, any good runs you want to speak of, and anything else you want to add, my friend.
Sure. Well, I'm going to start with hockey from that standpoint because we're doing that tonight, and we're so fired up about that, Ross. I know you are, and I'm sure many of the people that are watching this video are too, because it's, other than the NCAA tournament, it's the best thing for a postseason that there is. So lots of great things, and this is always an interesting point to me. So the Boston Bruins are the #1 seed and everything else, but they're a -350 favorite to win their series. And the difference between the NBA and the NHL playoffs is in this point. There are 5 series in the NBA that have higher odds than what the top seed numbers are in the NHL. So from that standpoint, so just the NHL is just, it's closer. Yes, you're scoring 1 goal at a time as opposed to baskets at a time, but still that's why it's that much harder. And that's why President's Cups, the team with the best record, has only won 8 of the last 34, I believe it is, Stanley Cups. So that's a big reason as to why. But so I'm excited about hockey. 6-1 run most recently on my big plays, 7-unit plays, 6-0, 6 or 7-unit plays, 10-3. So really good runs there. NBA didn't go as well as I'd hoped this past week, but hey, you know what? We got lots of opportunity this upcoming week. And so I'm looking to bounce back, get that done, get things straightened away there, and just kind of recalibrate a little bit of the thinking on this one. And then Major League Baseball had a nice winning weekend. So here we go, Ross. We've got lots of great sports going. It's going to be fun. How about yourself?
Hey, thank you, Doug. And again, you could find Doug at docsports.com. You could find me at rossbenjaminsports.com, rbwins.com, whatever you prefer. NBA playoffs, with the play-in tournament and the playoffs right now, I'm just 8-6. However, I'm a little top heavy on the sides, Doug. I've gone 7-1 on my sides, but just 1-5 on my total. So having said that, keep an eye on my sides right now because they're red hot in the play-in tournament and the playoffs, 7-1, including having the Clippers last night as a 7.5-point dog to 1 outright. So things are going fairly well in the NBA playoffs. I want to clean the totals up a little bit, and I certainly want to hit at a higher clip than 8-6 where I am right now. And also in the NBA, my 10-star top plays 27-14. With my last 41, that's good for 65%. That extends all the way back to 2020, folks. So you can see how selective I am when I use those picks. But when I do put them out, I've hit them at a high degree of success. So rbwins.com. All my single game and multi-game packages are guaranteed. If you don't win, you don't make a profit. I will credit your account back the exact amount of your purchase price. You could use it any which way you like, whenever you want. And also, don't forget Doug over at docsports.com. Doug also does a daily video, Tuesday through Sunday. So you want to check that out. A little shorter than what we do here. But again, this is a podcast. He does his free pick videos, and he'll add in a little tidbit here and there. And he also has his at the end of the show, his West Coast Wise guys who do very well, right, Doug?
Yeah, absolutely. Been on a really good streak of late. I think it's 18 games over 500 in the last 40 or 45, I think is what it is. So that's been really strong.
All right. So if you have not subscribed, folks, take a second to do so. It'll be well worth your while. And while you are in the subscription process, hit your notification bell and you'll be alerted right away upon any of our Winner's Circle sports betting podcasts going up on the channel. Right now, we broadcast 5 days a week during the playoffs, 6 days a week. So keep an eye on that going forward, and also give us a like at the end of the video. We appreciate all of you who have been new subscribers over the last 2 months. There's plenty of you out, actually over 600 new subscribers over the last 2 months, Doug. And I could speak for you on this.
Yep.
We deeply appreciate all your support and coming in to watch our videos and your feedback too, your comments. And we've really cleaned that area up a lot now. So it's okay to disagree with any of the other subscribers or even me and Doug or anybody else that is on this channel. However, keep it respectable, folks. That's all we ask. I mean, when you start attacking people's personal character and age and race or whatever the case may be, you're going to be gone. All right. I don't have time to tolerate that. Neither does the rest of us, nor the other subscribers should not have to be subjected to that. So just ask that you be respectful, folks. That's all. All right. Until the next time, as Doug will always say during his podcast, you got things to do. We got things to do. So we need to move on. But until the next time, for Doug Upstone and Ross Benjamin, I'd like to wish each and every one of you all the very best.